Let's talk mediation. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the conversation series on mediation, created with an aim and vision to promote awareness of mediation in the world around us and to talk about mediation and other alternative dispute resolution systems from the perspective of a common person. We continue with a short legal disclaimer. The views expressed herein are the personal perspectives of the speakers and may or may not represent the views of the larger professional community they belong to. The conversation series aims to provide a general overview and awareness on the subject matter involved and may not be construed as a professional or legal advice in any manner whatsoever. The session is being recorded for wide circulation. Let me introduce the main speaker and the guest panelists for today's session on the culture of restorative justice practice. We have Mr. Steve Rule, sir, who is the service manager of UK-based Portsmouth Mediation Services. He joined PMS when the organization was going through a difficult financial period. Steve's background is business and he brought an enterprising approach to the challenges that PMS faced, helping the service to reinvent itself with a new restorative USP. Portsmouth Mediation Services has since developed restorative practice skills and approaches helping to transform teams and communities by implementing and embedding a new positive restorative culture. Welcome, Mr. Steve Roll, sir. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Sonal. It's a privilege to be here.
We have as guest panelists Mr. Shijioke Nana Ibuku, lawyer, author, and member faculty, principal partner of 3Cs Met International Institute of Mediation, Negotiation, Counseling and Conciliation, and Center for Peer Mediation and Peace Building. A legal practitioner with almost 20 years post-call experience and a certified mediator, counselor, and author. He is also fellow of the Chartered Institute of Auctioneers. He has written and published books on mediation. Welcome on board, Chijioke. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, as always. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
We have Mr. Mena Migwi, founder and CEO, Sululu Mediation Center. Mena is currently lead mediator and trainer at Sululu Mediation Center and a Mediation Institute representative for the Africa region. An experienced and accredited mediator by the Kenyan Judiciary and Mediation Institute of Australia. In addition, he is an accredited mediation trainer and has carried out training for diverse teams within East Africa and the Southern Africa regions. Aside from mediation, Mena is also experienced in human resource management. Welcome on board, Mr. Mena Migwi. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine.
Mr. Isaac Azare is a skilled alternative dispute resolution practitioner. Isaac holds a bachelor's degree in management and computing marketing and a master of arts in peace and development studies. He has also completed numerous professional training programs, including ones in alternative dispute resolution, general paralegal studies, and leadership studies. Isaac is a member of the Ghana National Association of ADR Practitioners and the ADR International Register. Welcome on board, Mr. Azare. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be among you and to have this important discussion. Thank you.
Welcome. We are joined today by Tina Jones, who will be observing in the conversation. Thank you, Tina, for joining. Mr. Steve Rule, sir, since restorative justice practice, you have been doing work, and when we were reading about your bio, it's a culture that you have developed in UK, and how you have turned around Portsmouth Mediation Services from where it was going through a financial crisis, and you made a restorative justice culture as a practice in UK. We would love to hear from you, sir, how this has happened. Sir, you are on mute.
Sorry. How long have we been doing Zoom and I'm still on mute, you know, so yeah. Thank you, Sonal, and it is a great pleasure to be here and a real privilege to be amongst such good company. Are you okay if I tell my story a little bit?
Yes, please, sir. That would be
I
great.
think that's the best way to describe what's been going on. So yes, I'm sort of dialing in from a very cold Portsmouth on the south coast of England. It's the only island city in England, and it has a rich history of naval heritage. Even today, you can come to Portsmouth and see King Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose, and Lord Nelson's flagship, the HMS Victory. And as an island city, I think many of its citizens have that island mentality, if that makes sense. Also, just to give you a flavour of this city, it's one of the most densely populated cities in Western Europe. So it has its problems. And Sonal, let me just make very clear that when I talk about implementing and embedding a new positive restorative culture, this is not mainstream yet, certainly not in the UK. And it was a dream a number of years ago, a far-fetched dream, if you like. But just to pick up on the story, and it's good to make the point now that I'm not a mediator. My background, as Sonal said, is business. And in fact, the experts are on the panel here today. But I have caught hold of something on this journey that has transformed my life, and we'll see if we can convey some of that to you guys. So if we can go back to the summer of 2015, I was operating as a self-employed business consultant, and every Tuesday morning I met one of my friends who's in business. We had breakfast together, and he was a trustee of the Portsmouth Mediation Service. And back in the summer of June 2015, we were having breakfast together, and suddenly he starts to pour his heart out to me. He's saying that the Portsmouth Mediation Service is in a bit of a mess. The previous managers had to go, and he's quite stressed because all the day-to-day running of the organisation is falling at his door, and he can't get on with his business and so forth. And I don't know what made me say this, but I did. I said, maybe I can help you out in this situation. Maybe I can step into that void, that vacuum, provide a little bit of leadership, steady the ship, and buy you some time to get a proper manager in. And on that basis, well, I said I'd do it for 2/3 less than what the other guy was doing it for. And if at any point it wasn't going to work out, you know, we could call it quits. I said I'd do it for 3 months. And on that basis, he pretty much bit my hand off. So in June 2015, I walked through the doors of Portsmouth Mediation Service. I can't even spell mediation. I have no idea what's going on in this organisation. I walked through the door, and almost immediately, one of the first things I hear from one of the team is that mediation is becoming an outdated word, and that the future is restorative. Well, I didn't understand 2 syllables of that, but I sort of believed it. And I remember going and sitting in this little office, this little dark office, and thinking about this word restorative. And then I remembered my friend John Swindell, who was always talking about restorative this and restorative justice. And at the time, he was working in Kingston Prison in Portsmouth, pioneering restorative justice. This was a prison where lifers spent time, where people who committed murder and so forth. And he was doing amazing work there. So I phoned him up and I said, John, what is this restorative thing? And the way that he described it to me, and we're going to try and distinguish as we go along the difference between restorative justice and restorative practice and approaches. But the way that John described restorative to me, restorative justice, was that it was the opposite of retributive justice. Yes. And retributive justice, probably the same in your cultures, your countries. Retributive justice operates in the criminal justice system. And retributive justice asks three very simple questions. What law has been broken? Who is to blame? And what is the punishment? Interesting, because that sort of permeates every sphere of our lives, if you like. When I reflect on, you know, ever since I've been a little boy, the consequences for getting things wrong has been punishment. He then said that restorative justice, restorative, asks different questions. He said the first question was, who has been hurt? Second question is, what are their needs? Who else has been affected? Who is responsible? And what needs to happen now to make this situation better? I sort of got that. And it was interesting. In June 2015, Portsmouth Mediation Service was going through quite a tough period. And I will touch on this. I think it's relevant because there's something about getting people to mediation. You know, often there's lots of training that assumes two people readily want to turn up and have a conversation with each other and sort things out. Actually, I think often with mediation and restorative conferencing, getting people in the room together is a big task in itself. And at this time, Portsmouth City Council, we had an arrangement with Portsmouth City Council where we dealt with the with referrals from neighbour disputes. So Portsmouth City Council owns 17,500 homes in some of the most difficult and deprived areas of the city. And when it, you know, people living in tower blocks on top of each other, and when it kicked off, and it invariably did, particularly at the weekends, it was the job of the housing officer to refer that conflict to Portsmouth Mediation Service. And I remember at the time, one of the first things I did when in June 2015 was to sign a new contract with Portsmouth City Council. After I signed the contract, I read it, and as I went through the contract, I realised that if we didn't do more referrals this year than last year, we were going to lose lots of money, if you like. They were trying to move from a grant arrangement to a situation where they were getting better value. And I said to the team, we need to be really visible and out and about with the housing officers who make these referrals. I started to treat referrals as sales figures. That was my default in business, if you like. And so we went round to the housing officers, and I remember saying to them, why wouldn't you give these warring parties, these warring neighbours in the community, why wouldn't you get that off of your desk and refer it to our service? And they would say something like, we say to these people, you know, you two, you need a bit of mediation. And they'd be like, no, we don't need no mediation, you know. And of course, at that point, I could see exactly where it was going wrong. And I'm probably preaching to the converted here. So, you know, because my background's business, I know that if you want to do a great deal or get a great result, you need a great referral. And so we just started to work with the housing officers to get good quality referrals that our team could easily contact. And so I said something to them like, don't use the M word. Don't use the M word. Because, and I don't know what it's like in your cultures, but here in England, it has legal connotations. Some people think there's a winner and a loser sort of thing, you know, and it's not a great word. So, you know, what we want to do is bring people together. And I said, listen, don't use the M word. Next time, you know, it's kicking off or there's problems, say something like this, you know, thank you for bringing this problem to our attention. Let me explain to you what's going to happen next. We're going to introduce you to a specialist assessment officer. It's completely independent and impartial, and they're going to come and spend some time with you and help you find a solution to this problem. And it was interesting because our referrals went from 150 a year to 450 the next year, if you like. And so that was quite interesting. But in those early days, one of the first restorative stories I'd heard, and I started to go out with the team and learn what you all know, that but it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another, if you like. There's always two sides to a story. And but one of the first restorative stories I heard, and I think the key about restorative is that you're always looking to repair the harm and repair the relationship. And in those early days, I kept asking the question, what's the difference between mediation and restorative? And no one could seem to answer that question. And then eventually I realized it was the wrong question, and that mediation is a restorative practice, if you like, you know. And so anyway, there was a problem with a block of flats. The police have been called there over 120 times in 18 months. Some of you've heard this story. And there was all sorts of problems. There was CCTV cameras and intimidation and drugs and all sorts of things going on in this block of flats, and lots of problems. And so our one of our team goes in and starts to understand what the backstory is, and eventually persuades everybody in this block of flats to come to a restorative meeting. Everybody sits round in a circle. There was a number of different residents from different flats in the room, and I wasn't there, but I understand early on there was a handshake or two. And then one of the ladies stands up and says, well, if I left out the swear words, she didn't say much at all. But she said something along the lines that, yes, I have been playing my music really loud and getting drunk every night. She said, but that week I'd found out that I got cancer. Now the person who lived below her, who's banging his broom on her ceiling, he suddenly sees something different, and now he does her shopping for her. And I think in that moment I just saw how powerful it was when you bring people back together. And since then, got hundreds and hundreds of stories. I remember one case where two ladies who were having problems with parking came to our office, and at the end of the mediation or restorative meeting, there was no solution to the problem. There was still a disagreement. But what they had done is they had made up, and they were hugging each other, and there was tears, and they went back home together to sort the problem out. The best people to sort the problem out are those people that are caught up in the situation. So this restorative idea is always about repairing harm and relationship. We talk about this pyramid of escalation. Would you talk about that? Are you familiar with this idea, the pyramid of escalation, where something that breaks out at the base without any intervention just gets worse and worse and worse, and gradually rises up that pyramid. Eventually, to be fair, it will reach what I call the toxic top of that pyramid, and that's where you are in the criminal justice system. You know, there are neighbourhood feuds in Portsmouth that are 20 years old, and nobody has any idea how they first begun. And it's interesting because I talk to business leaders. Do you know that business has no idea about the cost on its bottom line when there are fractures and division in its teams? Has no idea. And yet all of us know how powerful and how valuable it is when you have a team of people that are properly empowered, that are singing from the same hymn sheet, that are working together, that are motivated, but there's great teamwork and communication, all pulling in the same direction. It's worth its weight in gold. And yet business has no idea what happens with just simple divisions in those teams. And what will happen at the base of that pyramid is that, and again, you'll understand this, is that conflict will break out. You'll start to get two camps of people, two sides. It will start to escalate. People will become entrenched. A team leader or supervisor or manager will try to make it better and will invariably make it worse, and it'll start to rise up that pyramid. Business still hasn't noticed. At some point, when it's quite serious, it will hit human resources. Yes. Human resources haven't got a clue what to do with it. So what will happen is they will enact the disciplinary or the grievance process. And all of us know that anybody that's gone through that and popped out the other end, it's not a pleasant experience as such. At this point, business has noticed, because you're paying someone thousands of pounds to be off work with stress. Now they're not stressed. What's happened is the fight or flight's kicked in, and they've run off. They've gone to the doctor. The doctor's signed them off with anxiety. They haven't got anxiety, but when they get at home and they sit there nursing and rehearsing, is what we call it. When they start nursing and rehearsing the situation in the workplace, then they do become stressed and anxious. So we're looking always to work at the base of that pyramid. And I describe Portsmouth Mediation Service increasingly like the fire brigade. I say to people, yes, look, you can phone 999 in an emergency if everything is blazing, and we've got a team that can come out and dampen all that down. But increasingly, we're in the business of handing out the equivalent of a restorative fire blanket or restorative smoke detector. And what we're trying to do at the base of that pyramid is to build strong, cohesive teams, strong, cohesive communities with positive relationships. Excuse me, let me turn my phone off.
Sure.
My apologies. Let me turn that off. I thought I'd covered all bases. So yes, trying to build great teams and great communities. We've sort of reinvented Portsmouth Mediation Service, as Sonal said at the beginning, with this restorative USP. You know, I do meet people that in human resources, and I'm just saying this, you know, that have trained as mediators and think that mediation is cutting edge. But I have to make the point, and I do, is that when you need mediation, it's already gone too far.
Yes.
So this restorative idea, in a sense, and I've always said this, Portsmouth Mediation Service is trying, with this new restorative USP, we're trying to do ourselves out of business. But interestingly, it's the opposite that's happened. You know, 7 years ago, we wrote sentence. We reinvented the organisations with a restorative, unique selling point, and we wrote a new vision, one sentence, to see Portsmouth become established as a restorative city. Well, to be fair, that's a joke, really. You know, that in the sense that is so impossible, so impossible. I thought, well, at least they'll keep us going for a while, you know, and it's certainly it orders a direction of travel that we want to go in. You see, at that toxic top of the pyramid, that's where everybody gets overwhelmed. Certainly in England, that's where all the money's spent trying to deal with the drugs and the knife crime and all the problems in the toxic top. But if you spent all your energy at the base of that pyramid, what are you going to do other than flatten that toxic top, if you like? And we believe, and I wrote this down, that putting public effort into helping people thrive is ultimately more fulfilling than having to spend money picking up the pieces of broken lives. We used to be an organisation that you phoned when you had a problem. And now, because we are training people with their own personal restorative toolkit that helps them develop good and positive relationships, that helps them to avoid conflict from breaking out and escalating if it does, because of that, suddenly we're an organisation that people phone when they want us to come and do teamwork and build great communities and change the culture. Suddenly we're a good news organisation. And yes, you can phone 999, but increasingly we're at the bottom of that pyramid. And in the last 7 years, we've trained thousands of people in Portsmouth. You know, incrementally, cumulatively, Portsmouth is coming a better place, really noticeable now, to a place where this sentence is not as silly as it was 7 years ago. We've worked with schools, with faith groups. Faith groups was interesting. I became really good friends with the imam of the local mosque, the Jami Mosque, and we got together on the basis of restorative. We both become restorative converts, and that was the glue that stuck us together for a really good journey. Since left and gone somewhere else, but we used to meet up regularly, and it was great because you know, you could have put us in a room, and if we discussed theology, we could have probably argued all day. But just, you know, as we built a relationship and started to understand each other, we developed something really, really strong. We've worked with faith groups, city council, social services, local residents, police teams, business, charities and voluntary organisations, hospitals. I mean, again, I don't know what it's like where you live, but in England, in the NHS, the National Health Service, conflict at every single level between managers and doctors and managers and staff and doctors and nurses and patients and doctors and relatives and nurses, and at every single level, it costs trillions of pounds. We're talking about how we can give the nurses a pay rise. Listen, if you got rid of the conflict, you could employ double the workforce as such. It's like a no-brainer, and yet our default as human beings is to put the door up when something goes wrong. So if there is a problem, I don't know, if your operation goes wrong, you know, the doors go up and the legal route opens up. We know what that's like. It takes years and years. People live under a cloud, and eventually they will settle out of court, but by this time lives are ruined. So yes, Sonal, you and interrupt me, but the moment
Yes,
you think
I would love to give you a breather, because yes, that was I was jotting down. So actually, you redefined mediation. Then there was persuasion, and then when you said that you sat down with the group and those people, and where you actually were giving information and knowledge to them, then your aggressiveness, which you call yourself as a non-mediator, but that I think that is the basic USP, because the way I agree totally that mediation is a peaceful method, but to make it happen, you need the aggressiveness of a businessman, because this has to come out and become a profession, a community which recognizes it. So I was just jotting down, and that aggressiveness actually, because that is the mind of a businessman working, and that was required to promote it. So that was really great, Mr. Seaworld. So let me ask somebody else's perspective who would like to give their views. Shizuke or Mr.
Okay. I think I've listened. Thank you very much. For us as mediators, I would disagree with you. We shouldn't use the word aggressive, because as mediators, I rather use the word being tactful, negotiation-wise. What he did actually to attract people was not basically aggression. He was just being tactful. And as mediators, we are very skilled, or we should be skilled or deft in the practice of conviction, because you're taking the place of another. And you could see what he said about a lot of people not remembering 999 and now calling their center when they had issues. It means that the people were comfortable with their practice, because you can't have the body for such matters to be reported to, and you choose the alternative. That's what I understood. I hope I'm correct. So basically, for him also saying restorative justice is a concept in mediation. It's one of the concepts in mediation. There was something he was saying too about when people say is when the issues are at the very height, that people step in, and that's when mediation takes. I agree, quite all right. That is indeed very good. That's it. But you know, basically, as mediators, particularly in community mediation, when you have community mediation, we don't wait for the issues to escalate. As it's beginning to, you know, shape up, as beginning to show its presence, you nip it at the bud. Because community education, that's why community mediation has been described as being constructive. It's a constructive approach. It's something that has to be on the spur of the moment. You wouldn't want to wait, for instance, if you hear that the people are being killed, particularly, for instance, in Nigeria, and you know why they are being killed is that the military are concentrated on that zone, or in that zone, I beg your pardon. So what you do as a mediator that has been called into that matter is to see how to make sure that the presence of the military is de-escalated, is reduced to the barest. Because if you leave them there, there will be plus or minus, there will be to a great extent multiple reactions, and the problems, the conflict still arises. So in context to what he said, I'm just trying to tell you, there are things that are very, you need to know how to use them in different templates. For instance, in community mediation, like I said, you wouldn't want the matters to escalate. You need to nip it at the bud.
Yes.
And let me hold on at that stage for other people to talk before I join. But it's been a wonderful, I've listened to him. He's made it very interesting. And also for the fact that he has, he's been doing, if he's not a mediator, he should go and get certified as a mediator. I tell people that even if you like, be a lawyer, be a human resource person, whatever you have to do, you need to have this skill. You need to be a mediator. You need to have this mediation skill. It helps you in whatever you're doing. If you're a restorative justice practitioner, you need that basic skill of mediation. If you're a lawyer, even if you've been a lawyer for 100 years and you're the highest with the Queen's Counsel, you need to have the basics of mediation. Thank you very much.
No, that was really interesting. So that is business marketing. You see there, Mr. Seagroll, sir, he's asked you to enroll yourself in his organization because we are doing training on mediation. So that's the aggressive thing that I'm talking about, if you understand.
It doesn't have to be mine, you know. It doesn't have to be mine.
That's aggressive marketing that I was talking about. So, Mr. Seagroll, sir, that message has actually gone, you know, that you have to do it aggressively. That's really wonderful. So, Mr. McVie, do you have any comments on that? That was really wonderful. Your experience and take on it. So.
That was a very good presentation, and you've done quite some good work. I must say, some great work in restorative justice. I must confess that I haven't really interacted with that restorative justice, but listening to you, I also realized that's also part of what we do through mediation. And it also drew me to what happened in Rwanda after the genocide. And they had these, they called them Kashasha courts. And ideally it was, yes, restorative justice. I've heard you talking about churches, communities, religious groupings. And from what I heard is the restorative justice that you are involved in really deviates from the dictionary meaning of restoration justice, which is a system of criminal justice focusing on rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. That's the dictionary meaning of restorative justice. But then I must say that's also what we do from time to time. Although most of it, especially when we are practicing in court, we may not be dealing with it like Chijek was saying, nipping it in the bud. In the courts, things have already happened, and the dispute is already at whichever point that it will be, you'll be appointed as a mediator in that matter. And ideally, what then will be happening is restorative justice, because it's not a matter of rules. It's not about what the law says. It's simply what the parties to the dispute find
Maybe we've lost you. Yeah. Yes.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
So
now.
restoration, the way it has been explained, it sounds very interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot that we can borrow from that as mediators, and maybe also expanding the range of services that we offer as mediators. It has been quite interesting and an eye opener, and also really really showing for me the bridge between what you're doing and also restorative justice. You're doing some great work there, and happy to have engagements with you to learn more what you're doing in that field of restorative justice.
Thank you, Maina. Can I just come back quickly, Sonal? Is that all right?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, just quickly, Maina, and yes, you read out the definition of restorative justice. I just want to make the point again that restorative justice operates in the tiny top of the pyramid, which is the criminal justice system. We don't operate there. Portsmouth Mediation Service and our restorative mission is part of what we call restorative practices and restorative approaches. So we're teaching people and enabling people to have better skills interacting with each other to prevent things from ever being needed to be nipped in the bud. That's how flat we are in that. And it's interesting because one of the bases of restorative is this idea that thoughts produce feelings, produce actions. And you'll know that often in mediations, one or two of the parties have got the wrong thought in their head. And that's what happens when you have communication. They suddenly realize, oh, it's not what they thought it was, if you like, you know. And one of the things I find interesting, I'm not a brain surgeon, but this idea of mirror neural networks. So one of the questions in restorative is, what were you feeling? Now, when someone in a restorative meeting starts to say, you know, I was feeling quite worried for my family, and I was feeling upset. As someone starts to share their feelings, the other person's side of the brain who's listening to this, their side of the brain that deals with feelings fires up. And that's how empathy is injected into the meeting. Isaac's nodding, you know, such. So, you know, when you inject empathy, you know, into those face-to-face meetings, you can achieve anything. Yeah.
Wonderful perspective, sir. Isaac, you want to say something because you wish, yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. And that is a great exposition by Stephen. He has been doing a lot of work. This shows the experiences that he have in the field. And let me also take it from this point of when it comes to restorative justice, as he mentioned that we should work up to a point whereby we don't even need a mediator to come into the people. The people should be able to negotiate within themselves. So it's all about mindset, people having the mindset of the responsibility to settle differences between them. So all this can come together when we also look at what happened in distant past, what happens in the immediate past, and what is happening presently. So if you look at within our communities, what we used to do, what are we doing now? Then we look at our former system when it comes to the justice delivery system, what are we doing and what are we contributing to the society. So when it comes to restorative justice, when you look at the normal former system, that is why mostly we talk about victim offender mediation, whereby when it comes to the criminal justice system, they bring in victim offender mediation to ensure that at least, if nothing at all, the victim is able to restore to at least there's some level of the thing that they might have lost, maybe when it comes to hospital bills, another thing that they might have lost. And also holding the offender accountable to what they have done. So when we look at that aspect, but I want to look at the community aspect. The community will look at seeing the person as a communal asset and what the person has committed against the community and being able to restore the community and the families back into their original point and where they used to be. So we should, it works in different avenues, different balances, and all that is important that we have to also understand is that it's either we are using victim-centered or we are using community-centered. And that is what is important for us as practitioners to also understand. And also, when it comes to the victim-centered, we are looking at healing. When it comes to the person involved, what are the processes that will bring healing to that particular person? And when it comes to the community, how are we able to even, if we are talking about a victim, we should also forget about the offender. How are we able to reintegrate the offender back into the society? So is the society willing to just nail the person or punish the person without accepting the person? But we should be able to get to a point where we understand that yes, the person committed something against the society or somebody, but he has been able to be reformed. And it's important that we accept that person back into the society as the way we used to see the person, and the person has become useful to the society. So that is what I want to add for now. As we move on, there will be more. Thank you.
Yes. But
Isaac, can I just come back to Isaac?
yes.
Yes, and I understand that Victor offending mediation is where Restorative's got some of its roots, if you like. I think for me, what a restorative city looks like is when its citizens are always looking to keep people inside family and inside community. Because our default, when somebody does something wrong, is to expel them, is to throw them out. And people do worse things on their own when they're isolated, if you like. So I would say that, yes, reintegrating people back in is because you've kicked them out. We've kicked them out in the first place. This restorative idea is about not kicking people out. In this country, and it's probably the same in yours, for 5 minutes of madness, we lock people up for 8 years. And when they come out, they're proper, they've got new skills, new friends, if you like, So, what some of the schools in Portsmouth have realised, a lot of schools, is that punishment doesn't work. And where they've introduced restorative circles and restorative leadership and have started to change that culture, what we see is detentions and exclusions plummeting, and interestingly, safeguarding referrals going through the roof, because suddenly now we understand the backstory of some of our children and everything's about relationship. So yeah, interesting.
Yes, that's what I also wanted to say, that it is basically inclusion and not exclusion. Including the person in the community and addressing what the issue is, what the problem is, going behind the person's behavior as to know where is the exclusion coming, where is that behavior which is not in conformity with the standards that is expected from the society. So it's basically, that's how culture building that I was basically wanting you to reiterate. And
I think
you are wanting to say
something. I think we should look at the pros and cons of we should just not look at the positives of this practice. I don't know whether you were the one, or I don't know whether I was in another forum where I was asked a question about the challenges of this practice in Africa. I don't know who asked me that question. I don't know where it was, but basically, for us as Africans, and maybe for you people in India, it would rather be very, very difficult for someone that has killed, shed blood of another person being reintegrated into the society. It will be extremely difficult for Africans particularly. And if you take into consideration the 5 R's of restorative justice, which is respect, relationship, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. These are the 5 R's of restorative justice. And in Africa, basically, it's one of the challenges. Maybe Steve will address that. Maybe just opposing it with what they practice in Britain. You see that a lot of people, it's very difficult. For instance, if God forbid, if someone loses his breadwinner, and you're trying to see how you want to reintegrate the offender into the system, all in the name of restorative justice. These are the snags in this practice. These are the challenges. Maybe Steve, you may want to address this. I'm not saying address it from the African point of view. Well, can I have a contemporary view from you in this respect?
Yeah. Just one mistake. Because Shijuki, I think we are confusing here in two things. First is restorative justice, and second is restorative practice as a culture. I think Mr. Mr. Sribrol sir would agree with me, and he will be able to explain it.
First of all, there's no difference between any nation or culture in the sense that we're human beings and we're all the same. And our default is to get someone back when they cross us. So if you're going to be restorative, you have to be intentionally restorative. You have to work at it, because we've all grown up with a punitive pathway. I said earlier, when I was a little boy, I had punishment at home. When I got to school, there was punishment. When I got to the workplace, there was punishment. In every walk of life, the way that we deal with problems is to punish people. We were talking to some teachers recently, and we were saying, why is it that if a child can't read very well, we give them extra reading lessons, or if they're not very good at football, we give them extra coaching, but if they can't emotionally and socially engage, we punish them? It's our default. It's the way we've always, and I will punish my children the way that my parents punished me. We pass it down, we inherit it, if you like. And nobody ever told us there was a restorative road. We only thought of this punitive pathway, this retributive road in every walk of our life. Nobody ever told us there was another road, which is why mediators and restorative justice facilitators are not very rich. It's all the lawyers that have got all the money because well, they do. So we're on a mission. We are. It's a huge vision, but we're and Sonal talked about aggressive. No, I'm not aggressive, but I am in a sales job. Part of my business path is sales, and I am selling this to anybody that will listen. And it's an easy sell. People readily get hold of the idea of this restorative road. I say to people, if you can cling to the restorative road, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Whereas this punitive pathway gets darker and darker and leads to death. It does. So interesting, there are no-go areas for restorative justice. And listen, I'm not saying that it's not difficult when murder's involved as such. My friend John was pioneering restorative justice in a prison. But 3 years ago, a guy called Ray and his wife Vi Donovan came to Portsmouth, and they run a trust, and they gave Portsmouth a restorative award. Now, Ray and Vi Donovan, you can Google them, their son was murdered by a group of drunken, drugged up youths. And at the trial, and of course, remember, and it'd be the same in your criminal justice system, I assume in Britain, if you get murdered or mugged or whatever, it's not even a crime against you. The victim, it's not a crime against the victim, it's a crime against the state, and the Crown prosecutes. And the most important person in the whole process becomes sidelined. And often they're left with lots and lots of questions, not least of all, why me? What did I do? Now, the Ray and Vi Donovans, when they were in the court, he catches the eye of one of the boys who's being sentenced for murder, and one of the fathers of the boys who's being sentenced for murder. And they go over, and the two men hug each other. And he tells a story that in a sense, they both lost their sons that day, you know. Now, to cut a long story very short, Ray and Vi met all of the guys that murdered their son. They wanted answers to the questions, and eventually when they were released, they worked with them in schools, talking about the problems of drugs and drink and so forth. Nothing was going to bring back their son, but this was restorative justice, and now Ray and Vi are restorative champions and ambassadors. And what they like about Portsmouth is that we're operating at the grassroots. There are no-go areas for restorative justice. I've heard a couple of stories from ladies who were raped. Horrendous stories. And one of the ladies says that the trial, the judge says to the rapist, "You've ruined this woman's life." And she was like, she wasn't having that. She wasn't having that. And so eventually she met the guy that raped her because she wanted closure. She wanted answers. She didn't want that hanging over her life, that her life had been ruined. Interesting story, because she never went in the room to say this, but restorative doesn't always have to end like this, but she offered that person forgiveness. It's all very powerful. She finds answers and closures. There are no-go areas for restorative. And I'm a little bit, Trajoki, you have to forgive me, I'm a little bit all or nothing. As I've been on this journey, I'm like, I'm restorative. There's no other way. And there are no-go areas. The key, as in mediation, is the preparation. And so when one lady met her attacker, it took 14 years for that to happen, for everything to be in the right place. Restorative can take 14 seconds in the classroom.
That is a thought process, actually. That is really a thought process, because when we see from the legal perspective, yes, crimes committed are crimes against the realm, the larger section of the society. But to a person who has lost their most valuable person in life, I mean, whatever the law is doing is a different thing. For them, they have lost. They've lost the meaning of life, actually speaking. So going back there and, seeing that person, maybe forgiveness or kind of, getting, because yes, you clearly said that, both the parents lost their children. One to death, the other to law, actually speaking. So, I mean, it's a loss for both the parents. And who is to be blamed? Whom to blame? Is the society's conditioning, the cultural conditioning is to be blamed. So it's actually what really what I wanted to bring through this conversation is that the restorative justice, whatever we call it, the justice or whatever we call it practice, it's when a society as a whole, takes it, when a society as a whole adopts it, then changes will happen. It's basically that, and to bring it to the knowledge of people who are not aware of it, people who are not. First of all, one should be, the society should be aware of something, then only they can, embrace it. So that was basically the meaning that I wanted to bring out. That was really wonderful. So any comments?
For me, I appreciate you, Steve. What you're doing, actually, I think for me, it's more like a divine calling.
Yes.
Because
Shijogi, you can switch off your
like,
camera. Yeah.
divine.
We are having issues. We are not able to hear you. You can switch off the camera and try. Okay, we are not able to hear you. Your voice
Because
is
it's not about
yeah.
what is you seek to get from me, but what's for basically just divine calling. And as I was listening to, okay, can you hear me?
Yes, no, we lost you. Isaac, you want to say something? You just
Yes, okay. So
and Chijioke,
what I want
relax.
to add to the discussion is that when we are talking about restorative tool, it has to also do with culture by culture, every society and what they believe or see as something which is restorative to them. So what might be working in, even within Ghana, in Accra, may not be working in my village somewhere. So we should also look at the cultural dynamics, how people view things, what they do there, and what they consider as something that is restorative to them. So we must also put all that. And in particular, when it comes to Africa, if you look at our history, our past, where before colonization, what were our people doing? In what ways were they resolving their dispute when it comes to Africa? What are the mechanisms that they were using? So if you look at the Ghana system, for instance, around the coastal line, they have something that they used to call palaver houses that they meet after farm work and all that to discuss issues and other things and resolve them. We have in the Ashanti region, that is the southern side, they used to meet and discuss when it comes to, they call it Gabokesi, and now they call it Akweside, where they used to discuss. And they are instances that they were using to even resolve family issues such as funerals. They have, after 40 days of somebody who is dead, the family must meet and resolve all outstanding issues even before the funeral and all that. These are all the things that they were using to restore families back together and societies back together. So it depends on the cultural dynamics within the society and within the African system as well. Because when it came to colonization, most of the things we became happy with a way of somebody deciding for us. We go, they pass a judgment, and people began to be happy, and that yes, this is the way to go. So we lost that aspect. But when you come to Ghana, although we recognize the use of the customary, some people prefer the court system. But there are a lot of people who are even afraid of even the court, just a mention of the court. These are the people that we must also focus when it comes to especially community mediation, having community mediation clinics, whereby it will be able to bring the people together and families together and resolve the community, so that the community will know that when it comes to peace or restorative within the communities, it's a communal asset, it's not an individual. If they are able to understand all these mechanisms, then we have a good way to go. So it depends, so it will differ from community to community and culture to culture. Thank you.
Well, very well said. Because that's what in India also we were practicing this. It's called panchayat system, where community mediation also happens. And that's how we have actually lost that touch from our roots. We have nuclear system of family has actually made people move away from that bonding, that society, that norms, that something that that was there, whether it was on the basis of religion or on the basis of communities, that there was some system which was prevailing, and that has really gone. So I think, sir, you there in Portsmouth are trying to maybe that's a modern way of saying it, but you're trying to build that system and that culture up, and that's
No,
where,
no,
yeah, please.
Thank you, Sono. And yes, and yes, Isaac, this is not a new idea at all. This goes back to early tribal civilizations, Australia, New Zealand as well, and in North America, North American Indians. They understood, and I say it again, they understood the importance when there was a problem, that the community came together to try and keep people inside that community and that family. So yes, this is definitely not a new idea, but it's a new idea in the West, and it's a new idea to our communities at the moment. Yeah,
It's actually reinventing of that into a new form. That's what I would call it. Yes, Mr. Migwi, you would like to put something there.
I appreciate what Isaac is saying, and Steve also bring a very wonderful discussion. And yes, it's I think it's key to have the people in rather than outside, because if you wrong me today and you are jailed, how does it make amends for what? There isn't a recent example in my country. Somebody went to an entertainment joint, went sort of one ended up shooting the other, and this person became paralyzed. So what happened is now was.
Shijuki, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah. Yes, Mr. Migwi, please.
So what now happens that the offender now is in an arrangement with the victim to take care of this victim, paying for the hospital bills, ensuring that this person is as comfortable as possible. So if you look at the situation, if this offender was put outside of the community, so to say, to be jailed, how would it benefit these victims? So I think that's a strong case for restorative practice, so that then people can really take a charge of issues and really work at bettering the community, rather than putting someone away where they end up coming out not better, maybe even worse. So it's a strong case for restorative practice, and we really need to preach this gospel so that then it can be embraced. Yes, in our societies in Africa, it has been there for ages, but again, also with the modernization, this has been overtaken by time, and mostly now people are rushing to court to resolve issues. But again, you'll find that even in my country, 90% of the disputes don't go to the courts. There isn't a strong belief in the court system, so most of these gets resolved outside. But then I wouldn't say it's all restorative, but then if these restorative practice was to introduce, then people would find ways of resolving their disputes amicably, or most importantly, ensuring that they do not happen in the first place. And that's also what we are doing through mediation, and not only offering mediation services for people who are in dispute, but also for those people who want to ensure that those disputes do not occur in the first place. I think that's the spirit of the restorative practice. Thank you.
Yes, very much true, very much true. So we really had a very good conversation, and it's been almost more than 1 hour. So any closing comments by anybody? I was
okay for me.
Yes.
Okay, for me, really, it's been a pleasure listening to you. For this practice, I see it as more of a divinely guided practice, because it's not an ordinary practice. It's not a practice everybody can get involved in. And the key thing for me is for the person to take responsibility, because you start from the person taking responsibility before you start seeing the victim, having any semblance of forgiveness. For practitioners in this field, just like Steve had said, is that you're never going to get, it's not for reward. It's just for plain human service, for humanity. And that to me is ideal, very, very key. And I really revere you for that. And another word, when I think of restorative, something that keeps dropping in my mind is empathy. Empathy, that's one of the traits as a mediator. So these are coinages that you really have to have in this practice. I still stand my ground that it's not an easy practice in Nigeria and Africa, because if it were, a lot of people will not be rushing to the courts. But as you are there positioning for it, nothing is impossible. The ultimate is for us to be better human beings. I tell I'm a parent, and I'm sure most of you are. I tell my children the greatest asset I will have by the grace of God, apart from bequeathing whatever I may have to them, is for them to be good people. That's a trait. When I say happy birthday to children or happy birthday to younger ones, I say for God to grant you the grace to be a good person. So being good as a person is the ultimate for us as human beings. And taking it from the key of this restorative justice is for us to begin to work towards a system that whatever happens, let the offense be something that wasn't planned, wasn't intentional. I guess if the offense wasn't something that is not intentional, the victim, though however difficult it may be, may find it easier to forgive. That's my summary. Thank you very much for a wonderful session. Thank you.
Yes, it was a lovely session and a very brainstorming, and I'm very sure whoever is going to listen, at least they are going to get an idea how a system, a culture has to be made of inclusion and not exclusion, of a society who has to now go back to its roots, where we started as a community and we decided to do things from the perspective of the common good of the community. So I think that feeling has to be imbibed once again, whether it is Africa, whether it is India, or whether it is anywhere in the world. I think that was really an awesome experience. And I should thank Mr. Steve Roll, sir, for this insight. And everybody, Isaac, Shijioke, Mr. McGee, lovely session. Thank you so much. Pleasure and honor to have you all here. It is